Hurling season is truly kicking off now. Kilkenny have regained the Leinster title. You're wearing the Limerick jersey after winning a Munster crown again, retaining it. And we're wearing them. These jerseys are from orgaretro.com. If you want to get these shirts or plenty more like them from all the other counties, go to orgaretro.com and put in the promo code OurGame. Michael Verney, between Limerick and Kilkenny over the weekend, we've two teams that are now in the All-Ireland semi-final, and they surely have to be favourites considering the other teams have to play off against each other. Galway tip, Waterford Clare, before they get a chance to play either of these in the semi-finals. So they've got that lovely little break now after good performances.
Yeah, you'd have to say, I wonder, are we previewing the All-Ireland final pairing here? Because the deck is definitely stacked in their favour, where we might have said before that provincial champions were waiting, for 4 or 5 weeks and it wasn't an advantage. It's definitely an advantage. Kilkenny will have 2 weeks potentially between every game, which is a huge advantage. And after Limerick playing 3 games, beating, Clare, Tip and Waterford, they now get a bit of a break as well. So the deck is definitely stacked in favour of Limerick and Kilkenny. But to be fair, Shane, they're provincial champions, and rightfully so. There should be some sort of a reward for that. And the time lag between games, the perfect probably gap between games, is there for them now. But like, what a weekend! In fairness, what a weekend!
Yeah, it was. It was hurling mana to have. Tipperary against Cork, which feels, and Clare against Wexford, the first game of the weekend, feels like it was weeks ago that was played. So much has happened over the weekend. To be fair, even on both coasts, there's just so much happening. But Limerick beating Waterford by 25 points to 21. I would say that even though people will come away talking about Waterford, because they did quite well and they kept into Limerick in a way that Tipperary were not able to do, and this is Limerick retaining and all that, people are talking about, well, have we found a way now, a blueprint to beat Limerick? Like, did you come away thinking that, or did you come away thinking, well, Limerick, wow, it's amazing how machine-like they are, that they come away winning the game against by 4 points against a team that did really well, and you're not necessarily saying there's 10 lads who played like superstars, it's just the machine just performed so well.
Yeah, no, I kind of think it's peculiar that people would try and pick holes in a 4-point victory, but that's probably just because of the standards we've come to expect from them. We expect this kind of, we expect them to shoot 30 points or 225 or something like that and win a game by 7 or 8 points kind of at their ease. And it's probably a false representation, just because Waterford really, really put up to them. We're not maybe giving Limerick the credit they deserve. They had a lot of guys who didn't maybe play up to their level yesterday, and they were still able to win. They still had the subs to come in. Adrian Breen, who we hadn't seen much of before, comes in and gets a point. Seamus Flanagan comes in and gets a score as well. You have to remember as well, obviously, Darragh O'Donovan didn't start. They started with David Reedy. There was kind of a few new faces moved around, and they were still able to find a result, and you never really thought they were going to lose. You think it was more, which is Watford are giving them a really, really good game here. Do you know what it reminds me of, Shane? The time Oscar De La Hoya fought Floyd Mayweather, and he didn't beat him. Now, some of the judges, it could have maybe gone either way, but it was said for years after, and De La Hoya kept saying himself that I provided the blueprint. This is how you beat Mayweather, and it was a blueprint. The blueprint was bollocks, really, because nobody was able to beat Mayweather thereafter, and he was able to keep everyone at arm's length. If anything, this probably has Limerick even more forewarned now, and with more of a point to prove. So I think it's a perfect scenario for them. They're going into an All-Ireland semi-final now with people. People are saying now, everyone was blowing you up so much now. Now there's a bit of doubt about you, and I think that's a great position for them to be in. What do you think? Do you think Waterford have provided the blueprint for everyone else?
Well, we'll have to go back to Golden Boy and Money Mayweather and all that here, because Mayweather is an absolute sickener. I think everyone knows that from watching him in interviews. Are you saying that Limerick are sickeners? And who's going to be the Conor McGregor for them later on? Completely out of their depth, getting absolutely battered and just, been held at arm's length and just popped just because they're a child. I know, I don't necessarily know I don't think you can say a blueprint has been shown. I think the puck out thing that Waterford did allowed them to have the puck out, tell them, go short to Barry Nash all day if you want, and we'll see if you're able to work the ball out and out hurl us. Because they tried to shepherd them into traps, I felt. Try and send him down the flank. But he was quite good at just, turning, running at his man and picking somebody in the half back line. Now and again, though, they did turn them over. So, much and all as the puck-out stats will say, I think in the first half, Limerick won 71% of their own puck-outs. And that is brilliant. As you know, over the years, been involved in many teams that kind of keep their stats. 71% on the face of it is brilliant. But did that mean that you had 71% of balls in attacking positions? Because if you hit a long puck-out of me and I catch it, we're ready to go straight away. We're one pass away from a point, or maybe I just throw it over. Not me, but somebody would just throw it over straight away. Whereas 71% here, how many of them end up in scoring opportunities, or how many require 5 more passes before they're up there where you want them to score? So I think that's a big point. Now, something to talk about with Limerick is the spread of scores, and this is the whole thing about the machine and the rise of their machine, that like you have Aaron Gallan scoring 10 points, 2 of them from play, and people might say, geez, he didn't light the place up, but he won his frees and he scored his points. Graham Mulcahy scored 4, he was brilliant, and as the game went on I thought he got better and better. Peter Casey with 3, he got 2 of them in the space of a minute there during the first half, he was excellent.
It was the tip full forward line, Shane, wasn't it? Rather than the half forward line, the one we talked about. And that's just, it's kind of just so reminds me of Kilkenny. Eddie Brennan could score 1-5 one day, maybe be quiet the next day. Richie Power steps up. Shefflin, dominates one day. Owen Arkin dominates another day. And that's a massive, massive luxury to have. As you say, and you go through the spread of scorers there, just means maybe no one singular person was doing a load of damage, but everybody was chipping in. And that's such a valuable thing within a team.
Yeah, and they probably created 39 chances to 33. Waterford needed everything to go over in the first half just to stay with them. So I did a snap reaction video after the game last night, and I was talking about after that first sideline cut that Austin Gleeson put wide on 2 minutes, the next 9 attempts from Waterford all went over the bar. And that was just to keep fairly much level. They were 9 points to 8 behind, and then Limerick did a bit of a stretch. And then Waterford came back again with a Kieran Bennett point. But they needed everything to go over just to stay in the game. So that'll tell you what you're up against when you're up against Limerick. They just don't really miss. Or if they do, it's only the odd chance. I was surprised to see Tom Morrissey get blocked down for a shot in the 18th minute. For example, Peter Casey as well, about the 23rd or 4th minute. You're a little bit surprised by that. And by the way they made those puck-outs be worked out from the back. I think Waterford did an awful lot right, but it's just not enough. When you're playing, the way people say, hurling's an easy game, soccer's an easy game, whatever it is. Hurling is an easy game when you have the best players, or when you've worked with them enough to make them the best players, which is why Limerick are so good. I mean, every one of their players are really skillful. Every one of them are able to run off the shoulder. Every one of them is able to pop a hand pass to that person. Everyone's able to run the ball out through the middle and pick a perfect pass into Aaron Gallan, or to Peter Casey, or to Graham Mulcahy. It's now become an easy game for them because they all know what they're doing.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting as well, Shane, looking at them, for our on Naveen yesterday, and just looking at the size profile of them. And everybody talks about the land of the giants, and they are. There's so many big guys there. But just when you throw a Graham Mulcahy and when you throw a Peter Casey in there as well, it just offers something completely different. They have the big, rangy, physical players, but they also have those lads that will kill you with work rate, obviously, but they'll also kill you with touch, kill you with movement. Like Mulcahy was drinking and jiving everywhere yesterday. Casey was brilliant in the first half. So it's almost like death by 1,000 cuts. There's so many different ways that they can hurt you, and it's crucial to say that as well, that while they do have all those big physical players, it's hard bait the bit of speed in the full forward line as well. It's hard bait that bit of creativity that they'll make something out of nothing, and I just thought they were brilliant, particularly after Michael Dignan said it on commentary yesterday that the water breaks are not tactical breaks, but Limerick are definitely using them as tactical breaks. And what they were doing wrong in the first quarter and in the third quarter was eradicated in the second quarter and the last quarter as a result of that. Because when you're playing, when you're getting to half time, you get some good messages sometimes at half time, and you change things up. But when you're getting those messages halfway during a half, it can make a big difference. And just like I put it this way, Limerick hit some long wides in the third quarter, stupid kind of shots, 90 yards out the sideline. I remember Will O'Donoghue taking on a shot from underneath the stand. Wasn't a percentage play. You didn't see that then in the last quarter. They got the little reminder, the tactics board was out. And this is where they were supposed to be shooting from. The first half was really interesting. Limerick's scores nearly the vast majority came from around the 45-yard line and in that kind of centre area there. So like I don't even think Connacht is telling them anything too groundbreaking. It's just these are the percentage shots. These are the areas we need to get the ball into. I thought it was really interesting from a Waterford perspective yesterday as well. We've talked about, Galan being the out ball. If they're ever stuck, leave a high ball in the edge of the square. I have to say, while Galan had got a couple of points and set up a couple of scores, I thought Conor Prunty actually took the out ball away from them.
He
totally
took
the out ball. It was not there. They did not want to do that because he was so dominant. He even got pulled in the first half for kind of playing Galan's hand, which I thought was a borderline, didn't think it was a free. But I have to say, he was high in my estimation before yesterday, and he's even higher now after yesterday. I thought he was absolutely outstanding because he was under a fair bit of pressure, and they all were. And Shane Fives really stood up. McNulty had a good first half, maybe struggled a small bit in the second half, but all the Waterford full back line had their moments against, a really top class full forward line.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of that is down to the position of Tadhg de Burka. He knows where to be. We've talked about other sweepers in the past couple of weeks, and maybe at times they're not exactly helping the man behind them, or else the communication from the man behind them isn't helping them. But that looks like it's something that's somewhat down to a T with them. Conor Prunty is that perfect fullback. We've talked about him all year, and even part of last year, that he's strong, he's fast, and he's dirty. And I mean that in the sense that he's physical, and he'll leave it in there. And I would love him
compliment, Shane.
Yeah.
It's the highest compliment. He'd be 10 feet tall if he said that, because you need that. He has that element to him.
And I'm not saying this to put referees on notice to watch out for him. I'm really not. He's just the perfect fullback. He leaves it in there. You're not gonna come away from a game thinking, well, geez, I had it fair handy today against Conor Prunty. No, he's gonna hit you without salt. He's a serious fullback. I thought there was an interesting conversation between Richie Power and a few more online last night. I'm just going to bring it up on screen and then you can react to it. He said, Limerick's third game of the championship. I'd love to know at the stat of how much they've outscored the opposition in the second and fourth quarters straight after the water break. This is where they're winning games. And there was a bit of to and fro, but Fintan O'Toole from the 42 had some good stats on it, and he said definitely told on the scoreboard today. They won the second quarter 7 points to 4 and the final quarter 7 points to 3. Outscored Tip 110 to 1-4 before half time to settle the semi-final. And Colin Ryan, who played with Clare, where Paul Connacht was the coach, goes, Connacht is a super reader of the game. This gives them an extra opportunity for him to tweak things. Game changer. He's obviously talking about the water break there as well. So every which way they seem to have it. They seem to get the message on quickly. They're in year one, whereas they're in year 4, Waterford are in year 1. So when he comes on and gives that message in 20 seconds, it's going to immediately click with the players. And yeah, I'm sure Liam Cahill and Mikey Beavens are getting their message across, because obviously the team has gone from not winning games in 2 years to winning a championship game, and then obviously getting into a final and performing really well. But there's just so much more work done. If you asked Liam Cahill, does he think he'd have his team purring even more after 4 years of it? It's pretty obvious what he'd say, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, Shane, it was interesting. Now, I could be wrong, but in the Limerick huddle, literally when Connacht is saying things, and it's the first 15 or 20 seconds, the heads are all like this. The heads are like this. They're all taking on a message. And for the second water break yesterday, the Waterford, the four guys in the management team actually had a huddle for, I'd say, the guts of the water break, and it seemed like it was more motivation maybe than maybe coaching or giving some sort of tactical kind of advice. So I definitely think even Waterford even Limerick have the water break down to a T. I think nearly from the moment they're drinking water, but there's a message being conveyed to them. And in fairness, listen, regardless of you're taking, it's like the Dubs have always done with any rule that's been brought in football or any change. You're basically manipulating the rule to suit yourself and get as much as you can out of it. And to be honest with you, from my point of view, I think that's to be admired. If you were part of that, if you were one of those players or part of that squad, I think you'd be absolutely loving that. You're not being left to your own devices. And just put it this way, if players are having a conflab during this 1 minute, I don't think very little would get sorted. It would just be a forward and back. The management would come in clear with a message: boys, we need to go back to what we were doing here. We need to be getting shots off 65 in around the middle. And I think they're definitely getting all the fruits of Connacht's coaching there.
Do you think that this water break is allowing teams to just change system as in a pre-planned way? So when I've seen those tactics board that Paul Connacht has had out in the last week, you've had like the sort of triangle formation for the inside forward line in one of them, and then it's been like the 3 men across in another stage. Now, I mean, there's obviously far more to it than that, but just in terms of a framework, do you think that teams have decided this is the formation that will work in period 1, 2, 3 and 4, or maybe even they're going to say, we're going to watch the first 50 or 17 or 18 minutes and then decide what our formation is? And to be honest, like, it really, the formations are only as good as the players you have and how hard you're working and all that kind of stuff. But do you think there's an element of pre-planned change of formation? You know, Davy Fitz talked about I have 2 systems and 3, whatever.
I'd say there's some element to it, but I'd say there is, and they have an idea maybe in their head of what they're going to do just to change it up. But I'd say a lot of it is taken on what they're actually seeing going on in the game. Say Peter Casey obviously went to town in the first quarter, and then he was out of the game pretty quickly. Like, they would have been planning, I'm sure they would have been thinking, just Peter Casey's flying it, he'll be on probably for the fourth quarter. Then all of a sudden it changes in the third quarter. They bring in Flanagan or they bring in someone different, and the shape kind of changes. So I'd say they have ideas in their head of what they're going to do, but they also will play it as the seed and change things as the seed if they need to as well. But I thought it was a brilliant game, Shane, from the sense that, like, Jesus, like you said, amazing when a manager comes in and just demands something of a squad. I thought Waterford are absolutely ravenous all over. A couple of guys definitely have to stand out for me, like Jack Prendergast in only his second inter-county season. Thought he really took the game to them and was brilliant in the air as well. He gave Dermot Burns a couple of awkward kind of moments, even though Burns was outstanding as well. I thought Stephen Bennett, this is obviously a pre-planned thing where he plays inside probably for the first half, and he comes out half forward as more of a kind of a playmaker in the second half. I thought we probably didn't realise the significance of the Breeze in the second half. He took a couple of shots standing maybe on the 65-yard line, and the Breeze just totally took them away. So you probably even have to admire Limerick even a bit more. Limerick got the ball in the first half against the Breeze into that 45-yard line, made the scoring chances so much kind of higher percentage shots. But yeah, I thought Waterford were brilliant. I have to eat me words as well. I thought Tadhg de Bourke would only get 15 or 16 possessions. I would safely say he got more than that, and he had even more influence on the game than I thought he had. But like, Waterford were beating a lot of bright spots coming out of it though.
Do you think that Limerick are very much, in terms of how they prepare for the game, looking at their own team only? You know, we saw that Tony Kiely wasn't necessarily man-marked in the first game, and you're wondering, is this a good idea? And Tony Kelly's form ever since shows that maybe it doesn't matter what you do, he's going to go to town anyway. But that aside, they didn't really necessarily seem to have an obvious plan for him. Same way with this game, it didn't seem like there was a massive plan for Tadhg de Bourke other than, well, you know what, we're going to outplay your team overall, and in general we tend to work the ball up the field so well that we're going to pin it exactly where those inside forwards wanted, or we're going to knock it onto our half forward line who'll steam through the centre and get those sort of scores. So I wonder, is that something where ultimately Limerick could get caught? You know, we talk about the template and all that, and there probably is no obvious template, but the fact that they might allow you to play your own game. The flip side then is, because Waterford played with de Bourke so deep, I think they obviously struggle to get the ball into the inside, and they are carrying a couple of average players that Limerick are not. Pretty much everyone on the Limerick team is a brilliant player. There's probably a few 6 out of 10s on the Waterford team. I think that's fair to say. Without naming names, I think that would be unbelievably harsh. But they didn't, whatever it is, like there's going to be a few individual mistakes around the middle with them spilling ball that they don't need to, turning good possession into 50-50 because they're just probably not as adept on the ball. Some of them, I'm not talking about all of them, there's some brilliant players in that Waterford team. But it amounted to not getting enough ball on the front foot inside to Deise Hutchinson. Like we saw at one stage, he turned Sean Finn lovely and knocked one over the bar. But really, how many balls did they get in there into the inside to him and to Stephen Bennett on the front foot? Just not enough.
No, definitely not enough. From a Limerick point of view, Probably don't like using the word, but like it's like they stick to their process. It's
Oh,
what they
it's
do.
it's process. It's
It's
stubborn.
what they do. Yeah, it's what they do, and it doesn't really matter what anybody else does. That's not to say that they're not planning for other teams, right? Like that. I'm sure they are, but I'm sure Plan A is this. I'd say Plan A and Plan B and maybe Plan C are what we're doing, and Plan D and Plan E are worrying about maybe what other teams are doing. Like I put it to you this way: like when Tony Kelly was out wing forward, Dermot Burns, his primary role, this is maybe funny to say as a defender, but I still think his primary role was to get Limerick on the front foot. His primary role was to set up attacks and be creative. Probably it was the same with Kyle Hayes. Kyle Hayes yesterday, by the way, who was outstanding in the second half, just kept bombing forward. And any doubts, like our question marks we had about, geez, why are they moving him back there? He might have taken a game to bed in against Tip. I thought he was brilliant the other day. But I just think Limerick stick to what suits them and try and manipulate the situation to what suits them, and don't worry so much about the opposition team. As regards, Deise Hutchison and Stephen Bennett, they just didn't get the ball in that they would like. And to be fair though to Waterford, I thought they were really smart in the third quarter. They kept running at Limerick. Limerick's tackling is dodge enough when you really, really go at them. There's probably a lot of frees to be won, and Waterford got themselves back in the game, got back level basically by running at Limerick. And with the way, you know yourself, with the way contact is gone in hurling now, they're borderline a lot of the time. A lot of their tackling is borderline. So when it's borderline, you're running at them and you're winning frees 65 metres out. Like Kilkenny did that last year as well. They went at that. That's probably a vulnerable little spot in them, is that they will give away a lot of frees. So that was one thing that really, really impressed me about Waterford. But they were probably, should they have kept tapping the ball over the bar and tried to cut the gap down? Maybe they try and force a couple of goal chances. But saying that, Stephen Bennett just laid on a pass for Ozzy Gleeson. It was just gone a bit too far over his head. There was one that Sean Flynn blocked as well, or Sean Finn. They were probably just forcing it a tiny bit. I'm not sure if the goal was actually there, but in fairness to the endeavour from Waterford, like they kept going and going and going till the very, very end, and they were trying to make something happen. Even Nicky Quaid's save from Stephen Bennett was, I know it was high, but it was still a very, very good save. Yeah. But all in all, you'd have to say Limerick probably in third kind of fourth gear, and they were still able to get the job done. A classic case of been in some other parts, really.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the half back line giving away a few frees. Waterford could never get into the inside to win too many frees there. So because Limerick had them stopped up by the time they got to the 65, it probably ended up, that's probably why it ended up with Dermot Burns a couple of times giving away frees and Declan Hannon. But I think they're happy to take that. We'll talk more about Galway and Kilkenny a little bit later on, but the one thing that should never happen with Richie Hogan when he's flicking the ball and going through is ball can go through, man can go through, but the two of them can't go through together. And I think Limerick will make sure that doesn't happen. So Waterford have got themselves to a stage of scoring 3 in a row between minute 48 and 51 to go a point ahead. And then Hegarty knocked one over to level it just before the second water break. And the thing that stood out to me just after that, when Limerick got the next 2 points, is just puck-out catches from Cian Lynch and Will O'Donoghue. It's such a killer. Puck-out catches from Waterford's restarts. It's a killer, and you end up with points for Sean Flanagan and Hegarty again. And they just use the ball so well. Like, they have it every which way. We've already talked about that. But even the puck-out catches as well. Everyone can do it, including Cian Lynch, who's obviously had a very tough time lately losing his uncle. Like, he comes in and he has a very good performance as well. And by the way, there's probably a couple of guys on the Waterford team that are quality. They've either won them before or they're playing that level, who I didn't feel did catch the level that they should be catching. Like, Austin Gleeson got 3 points, but he was taken off late on. Now, his points, it's not like he created something out of nothing. They were probably routine points as far as he's concerned. He needs to be doing an awful lot more in a game like this. But I mean, maybe that's the challenge too. If you're a Limerick player and you play 7 out of 10 or even 6.5 out of 10, you're going to be on the front foot and playing well. Whereas if you're Austin Gleeson and playing 6 or 7 out of 10, you don't have the same quality around you, so you're probably not going to get as many handy chances. But he'll want more. I think Jamie Barron, who we've waxed lyrical about so many times, is such a good player. It probably just didn't happen for him either. And not because it couldn't have. It just, I don't know, sometimes he'd spill the ball or make little errors. It just wasn't his day.
Yeah, I know we kind of, maybe I'm talking on both sides of my mouth here, but while you say Limerick don't necessarily go after opposition players, I think to some extent they went after Ozzy, because I think Ozzy was under more pressure when the ball was around him. Obviously he was slipped on a few points, but there seemed to be two lads really up on top of him when he got the ball. He was turned over a couple of times even. Jamie Byrne rarely got the ball in space. I don't remember him getting the ball in space anyway. There always seemed to be guys around him, and maybe that's because they were in that kind of condensed kind of middle third. But I definitely think they got a small bit more attention maybe than other guys, because I'd say Limerick probably knew that if they were able to cut down the influence of those two guys, they would definitely, cut away at Waterford's chance to win the game. So I do think there was a bit more pressure on those two lads maybe than other lads. But like we talked about all the new faces, the Callum Lyons, Jack Prendergast, Jack Fagan, these guys. Probably a mixed bag for the new faces. I'd say maybe two or three of them were, very, very good, and two or three of them were a bit off colour. But that central kind of spine, 6, probably 8 and 11. De Borca was probably the only one that had a big influence on the game, I would say. I'd say Jamie Byrne and Austin Gleeson were quiet somewhat. And Waterford are going to struggle to win, games against particularly probably superior opposition when two of their best guys aren't maybe up to the level. But all in all, from Waterford, I thought it was a massive, massive team effort. Massive effort. It was great to see. Like, imagine being from Waterford. I'd say it was unbelievably heartening to see that, considering when you compare that to what you've seen in recent weeks. And I suppose the challenge for Waterford, or recent years I should say, the challenge for Waterford is to back that up in 6 days' time against Clare. And it's going to be difficult because they really emptied the tank. Shane Five's probably going to be out. Looked like he pulled a quad or something coming off. They might have a couple of guys maybe back in the mix, the likes of Dara Fives, who was injured before. But it's going to be hard to back it up. And wouldn't it be a fair success of a year for Waterford if they were able to back it up and get to an All-Ireland semi-final, and we wouldn't know what would happen there.
Yeah, and as much it's been a great start for Liam Cahill. Much and all as you're losing the game. I think anyone who wasn't on board with how he's trying to do things this year, he pretty much will have the public on side now, because we kind of said in the preview show there last Thursday that I was concerned about a 10-point loss here, because I thought Limerick over the course of the game would pull them apart and pick holes. And I was wrong. And to be honest, I'm delighted I'm wrong, because you need as many teams competitive and able to compete with the likes of Limerick to make this an exciting championship. Now, at the flip side, I did throw out a tweet on the Our Game Twitter last night asking, are Limerick beatable in the 2020 All-Ireland Series? And interestingly enough, now this is 16 hours in, 73.8% said that they think Limerick are beatable in the championship at this point. I thought that was interesting. I thought that, well, okay, fine, they only won by 4 points, so it feels like, yeah, okay, maybe we could catch them. But the flip side is, it looked like 4 points at arm's length throughout. I know that Waterford were level with 20 minutes to go, but I can't say I ever truly thought that Waterford were going to win here. They never made that burst. Probably going to need a goal or two, really. Like, do you see them as being beatable?
Well, everybody's beatable. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I said. No, they are beatable. Of course, they're beatable this year. On a given day, if someone's able to match what Waterford were able to do yesterday, maybe raise it a small bit, and maybe have a couple of more killers in attack, I definitely think they're beatable. And will they be caught cold like they were against Kilkenny last year? Probably not. But they are definitely beatable. Just a couple of quick points, Shane. Just little notes I made during the game, which I thought was interesting. Limerick only pass the ball in the forwards when the shot isn't on. If the shot's on, they'll take the shot. We saw some of the kind of foostering that Wexford were at the other day, like passing the ball around everywhere and passing it every which way. If the shot is on, a Limerick player will take it. They always take the right option. They're so selfless. Will O'Donoghue as well is probably one of the most selfless players ever to play the game. He generally only takes the right option, and whatever the team option is. I thought there was a good foul as well by Shane McNulty in the first half. A good cynical foul. People won't like me saying that, but Aaron Gillan was just getting up and McNulty was down, and it probably would have been a goal chance, and he pulled him down. A couple of other little bits and pieces. Limerick went to the free man with the puck out. That was an interesting, as you talked about, it was an interesting strategy from Waterford, as was to deny, if they're able to play it the whole way through the line, and Galway made Kilkenny do this the other night as well, if they're able to do that, I think that's nearly more difficult than putting a ball down top of the 45 and a man catching it. So they tried to take away maybe Hegarty's influence and Morrissey's influence, and to be fair, they did that to some extent. they didn't make the half forwards redundant, but they made their job a lot more difficult. They denied possession and said they would give possession to somebody else who they didn't feel were as comfortable on the ball, i.e. maybe a Barry Nash or even a Dan Morrissey as well. And just on Dan Morrissey too, I thought he was very good too, very solid. I think he's really settled in to that full-back position. Now, fair enough, he had a free man in front of him for a good bit of the game. Limerick look a lot more solid at the back now, particularly in the last line of defence. And Richie English was obviously on the bench the other day, so he could see action yet before the end of the championship. But I thought it was an exciting game. I thought it felt like a provincial final without fans. I thought it had that kind of just that air to it, that it meant something really, really important. And I think it's important as well to bring up John Kiely's comments. You probably have them a bit more there in detail in front of you, just about like even how he said about that they wouldn't be presenting the cup until the Tuesday night of training due to the lads that weren't there. I'm sure you'll take it up from there.
Yeah. So just even to look at broadly speaking what he said, he just said that he basically hit out the restrictions, which mean that 10 players from Limerick's full panel couldn't be in Semple Stadium to watch the game. And, that is a very tough thing for a player to have to deal with. And I think the quote was, he'd appealed to the government authorities to look at that at national level to end that. What are your thoughts on that? We're talking about a stadium that fits 50,000 broadly speaking, and you can't have 10 more lads spread out somewhere. I mean, to me, I think everyone knows what's going on at the moment, but I don't think it's right. They all drive up separately, all come in separately, put on your tracksuits, stay apart. To me, I think that's over the top. That's kind of like, I don't know. I don't like it at all.
I agree with you 100%. They're all training together every Tuesday and Thursday or whenever they're training within the 24-hour window. There's absolutely no problem with lads coming. Like, it's not extra guys on a bus. It's not more guys that are going to be in the dressing room like that. They're not going to have really any part other than actually being there. They're the ones that help to get Limerick there, help to get Waterford there. It's a bit of a thumb in the eye kind of to them, really, because at the end of the day, why are these games going ahead? The games are going ahead because the players essentially are allowing them to go ahead. They're making no issue of going training, doing everything that they would normally do in extraordinary circumstances. So I think it's a bit. I know what people are going to say. People are going to say, "Listen, I can't visit X, Y, and Z." I understand that. Why should 10 extra lads be able to go to the match or whatever? They're not going to be on top of each other. We see everyone. They're well spread out. They're going to have their masks on. I just think, a squad is a squad. There's 36 people in a squad. To be honest with you, each of them as important as the 1 to 15 or the 1 to 26. So I don't see any major issue with it. As you say, they're going to drive up in their own cars. They're not going to be mixing with a load of people. It's an extra 20 people in a stadium that can hold 50,000 in Thurles' case, or 55, and 82,000 in Croke Park's case. So I have no problem with it at all.
Yeah, and when people say, "Oh, look, you already have your matches, you can't have your cake and eat it too," and people are saying, "I can't go playing golf," and whatever it might be, and my answer is, you should be allowed to go play golf. I have no problem with that. There's many things that are happening in society right now that you should be allowed to do that are probably overkill as far as I'm concerned. But look, that's a point for another day. But John Kiely has come out with that, and I'd say things probably won't change that in that respect before the end of the championship.
I think John Kiely's a very clever man as well, Shane. I think John Kiely is great I think he's really smart at changing the narrative, I have to say too. I'm not saying that this is a planned move or anything like that, but I have to say he's actually, from our point of view as journalists, he's great, because we're not maybe analysing the Limerick performance as much, or it's not talking about, Limerick are an unstoppable machine, you're going to, back-to-back Munsters, 5th title Kiely has won under his reign. Do you know what I mean? I think it's really, really smart. I think it changes what people are talking about, and I think it's a good move, and I think he's very like Cody in many instances as well. When he says things like this, I think it's very basic, but people will agree with it. Like, it's a squad. Everyone's in part of a squad. Those 10 guys are watching the game from home or whatever yesterday, that's not what a squad member should have to do on match day. They should feel part of it. No more than when Paul Brown ran out the dugout in 2018 before the All-Ireland final. He was allowed to do that because he's a valued member of the squad and was injured. So I think those 10 guys kind of probably shouldn't be disrespected like they are being disrespected at the moment.
Yeah, and just a final point then from a Limerick point of view, Jack Neville has tweeted, John Kiely has led Limerick to 8 Munster Championship victories in 4 years, as many as in the 20 years from 97 to 2016. He's also won twice as many Leinster titles in that time. Make no mistake, these are special times for Limerick. Long may they last. From a Tipperary point of view, I'd say, well, hopefully they can be ended before too long. But anyway.
Just on that as well, Shane, like we beat Limerick, we hammered Limerick down the Gaelic grounds in 08. Tipperary obliterated them in an All-Ireland semi-final in 09, I think.
Yeah.
There was the Justin McCarthy days. Do you know what I mean? Graham Mulcahy actually got his start with Justin McCarthy when
and
they
Nicky
had a squad. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, and Nicky Quaid. So, like, there were dark times only 10 years ago, and they've turned it around magnificently with a load of work at underage level, and they have a really, really special group there at the moment.
They do indeed, and Kilkenny will feel that they have a special group building as well after winning that Leinster title. The first time in 4 years that they've lifted the Bob O'Keefe Cup, winning 220 to 24 points against Galway. And coming into this game, I think most people felt that Galway were nicely primed for this. Shane O'Neill hit the ground running in his first season, in the sense that he looked so good after that win over Wexford. There was a couple of very encouraging displays during the league, as long as you take out that performance at the Gaelic grounds against Limerick, and it really felt like they were motoring well. And for most of the game here, they kind of were. And then it came down to the last 20 minutes, from the second water break on, they lost that 2-6 to 6 points. And Richie Hogan came in, and Richie Hogan says, "Do you know what? It's 2015 all over again. I'm going to be hurler of the year here for 15 minutes and win the game."
Yeah, he was unreal. It was exactly like that Leinster final. He came on and got 5 points. I think he actually had his hand strapped that day, and he doesn't normally wear a glove, but he had his hand in a glove the other day as well. And he didn't get 5 points, but he got 1-2. And he just looked like that little kind of wrecking ball when he got the ball the other day. You just thought he was going to do something special every time. Now, he might have forced the issue one time when he gave a kind of lateral ball across, when I thought he could have shot himself and they lost possession. But he just looked so dangerous. And like, if you look at it, Dahi Burke had been absolutely outstanding until that point. He'd probably actually cleaned out TJ Reid. And then all of a sudden, Richie Hogan comes in under that high ball, doesn't even try and catch it with Dahi Burke, touches it down. Now, Éanna Murphy and all goalkeepers, in my opinion, should never leave the goal line. But what Richie did to flick the ball away and then pick it, and this kind of reverse flick, that's classic freestyle hurling, really. Like, that's a guy who's on top of his game and who's just thinking on a different level to most other people. But I suppose it's been really frustrating for him. His last appearance before the Dublin game, his last appearance was in the All-Ireland final when he was sent off, and it was massive redemption for him. We've never doubted his ability. It was just a matter of whether he could get back up to that level again, and whether his back injuries and hamstring injuries and various injuries weren't holding him back. But he was brilliant to watch the other day, and it was like he came in, turned the game, and it was classic Kilkenny. Within 60 seconds they'd rattle 2 goals. They hit you with one sucker punch, and then they went straight again. And even to avoid cynical fouling, when TJ got that ball, he had just a yard. I think it was on it was on Gerard McInerney, the yard on him. And he just turned left and right. He didn't run straight into him, just turned left and right, got his yard, and then he walked the ball into the net. A classic example for all young fellas going through on goal, just to even shorten that grip, throw it out in front of you, give yourself a better chance. But Galway still had a chance to bounce back after that. And I suppose
they got back ahead. Like that was the thing. They'd gone from a situation of conceding 2 goals in a very quick space of time to getting themselves back 2 points in front. And they just, I don't know, is it they didn't have the composure when it came down to the end, or is it just Kilkenny, much like they did against Dublin, when Dublin had come back from 16 points behind, they had the more composure on the field, the more assuredness in what they were doing. They had Richie Hogan and they had TJ Reid up front, and they had Niall Brazel coming along, and he was knocking a ball around lovely for Martin Keown to get a point. And the likes of Keown played very well, and Conor Brown came in and played very well. An awful lot of lads who haven't been here before winning Leinster titles. And just another further word, I'm just going to bring up the Richie Hogan flick and score again. Like 4 beautiful flicks to end up with that ball in the net. One to take it away from his man, another one to take it around the goalkeeper, and it flicked off the goalie ever so slightly. Another one then to just control it and then into the back of the net. But Éanna Murphy, you're going to have to learn on your feet, I think, at this level, because you're mistakes like that will never get punished at club level. Well, they'll very rarely, unless Richie Hogan is playing club against you. They're just not going to get punished. Whereas here, like, that can't be allowed to happen. It just absolutely cannot be allowed to happen that a player can take the mickey out of you like that, flick the ball around you and put it into an empty net. He either had to stay back or he had to absolutely clean Richie Hogan's clock.
Yeah, it's a big bugbear of mine. I just don't think the keeper should be leaving the line. Like, if you leave an empty goal behind you, I just think it's an absolute disaster. It only takes a tiny little flick. Like, would Richie Hogan ever take a shot? That wasn't even a shot. He would never take a shot like that. But when the goal is free, all it needs is a little flick. Whereas if the goalie is standing there, like, I think Richie Hogan has an awful lot to do if the keeper doesn't come off the line. I think he has an awful lot to do. And I think the top keepers just will not leave you that chance. It's like under a high ball, full back and full forward. Like, an inexperienced keeper might come out on top of the full back and the ball's in the net. An experienced keeper will stay on the line and he'll have time to react. So, listen, I thought Aidan Murphy was good in other aspects, but I just, leaving the line is a massive, massive bugbear of mine. And that instance probably changed the game. The fact that Kilkenny were able to go behind and come back again. Joe Canning probably missed a couple of frees that were uncharacteristic for him.
Going for a goal for no reason. I mean, I couldn't understand that one, going for a goal. I think it was the 46th minute. You're up by a point. You know, Kilkenny are struggling to even create chances here. Why give them that kind of boost, that psychological boost of taking on a goal when just keep the scoreboard ticking? And that was the big problem for Galway. Great
save, by the way, Shane, from Conor Fogarty. Yeah. A brilliant save down low, but yeah.
But the other thing is you have to shoot up high, because if it's going to be saved, at least it'll be knocked over the bar, or worst case scenario out for a 65. It's very hard to save a goal shot up high and also control it back to yourself. Whereas if it's a low one, it's just going to fall at your feet and you will be able to clear it. So that's something. I think there's a bit of game management, like they say in American football, we need situational football here. We need players to understand what's going on in the situation. How do we best manage the situation to move forward? Because you can't emphasise enough how much Kilkenny were struggling to actually get scores here. Because, TJ Reid didn't puck a ball for a long, long time. Obviously took Richie Hogan to come in and turn the thing around. But after 53 minutes, the forwards had scored just 3 points from play. And I was just looking at it there. It was in the last 20 minutes, like from the 52nd minute onwards, that Kilkenny really started to come into this game. They had 19 of their chances they had 11 of their chances from the 52nd minute on, whereas Galway had 33 of their chances before that, and just they missed more than half of them. They missed about half of them, I should say. So they just left it behind them. But like playing with a sweeper, I don't necessarily have too much of a problem with Galway doing that, because it wasn't the fact that they played with a sweeper. And a commentator told me that they heard TJ Reid shouting, "They're playing a sweeper," almost delighted with it. But it's not the fact that they played a sweeper that lost them. It's just the execution up front. The shooting was terrible. Conor Delaney held up Conor Whelan brilliantly at one stage, which would have otherwise been a goal. So there was really good defending on behalf of those Kilkenny players as well. Pádraig Walsh was obviously brilliant. So many of those defenders did brilliantly. But Galway have to look at themselves and say, how did we throw this away, didn't they?
Yeah, can I just ask you was Pádraig Mannion wasted in that role? What influence did he have on the game?
Probably not enough, but again, it comes back to like how many of those Limerick players played 8 or 9 out of 10. I mean, in a way, probably load of them quite did, but nobody really shot the lights out. But what he did was he made sure that Colin Fennelly wasn't getting the ball in the front foot, TJ Reid wasn't. I mean, Owen Cody in the forward line for Kilkenny was huge, and I think I never fully understand that Sean Loftus playing corner back. And even more so now, like Aidan Hart has played there, and people, not everyone is Aidan Hart's fan, but I think he's good and he's a grizzled player who's not going to have a high ball won over him by a fledgling player coming in. And Owen Cody's going to be really good and was really good. That's pretty obvious. What I would say is at the back, Daithí Burke comes back in after being out injured for a number of weeks, and he caught one great ball over TJ Reid. I think it's at one point, you might remember that. But he was a little bit off the pace as far as I'm concerned. Normally he's imperious. But a couple of times, and they even showed on the Sunday game, he fell on his backside a couple of times trying to twist and change direction. And that's something when you haven't trained quite as much for the last couple of weeks. And who knows, like, was he binding himself a little bit during Turlough Moore's run? I know just before the final when he went off and came back on and obviously couldn't move with his calf. But even at the start of the game, he flicked down on the top of Colin Fennelly's head and gave away a free. And that to me said, this is not Daithí Burke at 100%. So they kind of let them in a little bit that way. The sweeper thing, you could make an argument that they could have done something else. But I don't mind it too much because you should have won the game. You really should have won the game. But like Joseph Cooney going on TJ Reid and marking him everywhere he went. Now that obviously allowed Kilkenny to try and put him in awkward positions, but I thought he did really well. The goal that TJ Reid scored where he stood him up and danced around him, I think TJ Reid is basically going to do that to every single player in Ireland. So it's not like, oh, Joseph Cooney was found out there. TJ Reid got the ball in a position where it's a bit like Conor Callaghan on Lee Keegan last year. Lee Keegan's the best defender in the country probably over the last 10 years. If he's going to go around him, he's going to go around anyone. So I think Galway did most things right. It's just a case of probably getting swept up for a few minutes in Kilkenny getting those 2 goals of a shot, not being able to score one themselves, forcing chances when they weren't on. And I think they probably... Do you feel they left it behind them? Because I want to say that, but at the same time say I think Kilkenny were really, really good here. And this could be a landmark win for them because so many of them haven't won championship silverware. And it allows them to get into that semi-final and wait to see who comes next. And they're probably on the more favourable side of the draw. And you might end up with the winners of Tip and Galway facing Limerick on the other side. So it's all coming together nicely for them. And you could see how much more happy they were winning their Leinster title than Limerick were. You know, it clearly meant a little bit more for them because Cody even said himself, it's huge for us.
Yeah, I think only once in their history have they been beaten in 3 Leinster finals in a row. I think it was 1919 to 1921. Brian Cody has an absolute heap of records as Kilkenny manager. Obviously, you know, 11 All-Irelands. I think that was his 16th Leinster. That is one record he did not want, to lose 3 in a row. I think it's huge for them. I kind of said it in the preview show. When you have a load of new faces in, you Tommy Walsh in, who I thought was really, really dogged on Brian Concannon. That's one thing I will say about Galway as well. Did they throw it away? I'm not so sure. Was Conor Whelan outstanding? Was Concannon outstanding like he was the last day? Did a lot of guys that played to a good level. They'd probably not enough lads that maybe shot the lights out. Conor Delaney I thought did a good job on Whelan as well. A lot of kind of spoiling. Just kind of he got very few. Was able to get very few shots away.
But I agree with you. Like these players played really well for Kilkenny. But if you have 44 chances and you're Galway and Kilkenny have 30. That's what I mean when I say that they leave it behind them. That's not to discredit what Kilkenny did because they managed the situation better. They used their assets better. They brought on Richie Hogan and they won the game and took it away from Galway. But what I'm saying is Galway should be kicking themselves because they had the opportunities to win.
Oh, they should be kicking themselves, and their whole year has changed now. Now they have to go down the rocky road of playing Tipperary with all those classic semi-finals that we had in recent years, and they have to pick up morale, you know, a week after that game. So it's definitely going to be challenging for them. From a Kilkenny point of view, like this just further backs up to me the genius of Cody and the culture that he's created. Would most people say this is, you know, where would they rank this Kilkenny team among the many Kilkenny teams he's had? Probably not unbelievably high, I'd say. Probably somewhere around the middle. Yet he's managed to get, you know, they've managed to win a Leinster title, probably against the head, particularly as the game was progressing. Probably thought it was against the head. Managed to beat the All-Ireland champions last year. They managed to win a league in 2018. So I think this is huge for them. I like Owen Cody's first Leinster, Conor Brown's first Leinster, Conor Delaney's first Leinster, Tommy Walsh's first Leinster. I think massive belief will course through them now. Probably looked like Richie Latty hurt his hamstring. He came off on the hour mark. Thought he was very, very good. Did a lot of dogged kind of work maybe, which we wouldn't have associated with him before. Would have been more pints and things and going forward. I thought he was brilliant. Picked up, done a lot of kind of dirty work around the middle. But I think this will be firing through their veins now. I think to be even more confidence going into this. And it's just the idea of they've been beaten in the last 2 to get over the line now. They bought themselves an extra week's rest. They're sitting pretty. They're sitting pretty. How many times we said about Cody just manages to produce this, whatever culture he's ingrained into that jersey. You seem to know what you're going to get out of lads. And when you rank them and put them side by side with other hurlers, maybe a lot of Limerick guys, maybe some Tip guys and Galway guys, you mightn't think they're as good. But when they put on that jersey, they just seem to. There's just a level of honesty that you get out of them. And I'd rank this pretty highly in Cody's list of achievements.
Yeah, you have players here just playing to their max level, and that is credit to the manager. And the fact that a lot of people would have thought Richie Hogan's going to struggle to come back after what happened in the All-Ireland last year, coming on against Dublin and missing 2 shots in front of the post that he'd normally knock over with his eyes closed. the fact that he kept faith in him, brought him on, and you see Richie Hogan beaming from ear to ear after the game, it was obviously a huge thing for him. Another point that must be made is Jason Flynn obviously missing that goal, which would have put Galway 5 clear after 50 minutes. That was huge. And also,
be a shame if he went the other side. If he went like Murphy had leaned to the near post. If he gone the other side, it was probably an open goal.
That was a desperate miss, I have to say. Jason Flynn, there's no excuse for missing that when you're a top forward, and he is a top forward. You need to be burying that, especially like so. And this is what it comes back to. Like, they had the chances and they just weren't able to do it. And now they've set themselves the back road. It was all set up lovely for Galway. They battered Wexford, get a goal here and probably manage the situation and go through to an All-Ireland semi-final, let the other teams knock the snot out of each other and be ready and waiting. You know, it just seemed like it had all opened up lovely in front of them. A word obviously about Canning's sideline to Joseph Cooney. Now, like TJ Reid had actually fallen asleep, and Joseph Cooney had outscored him at that stage. It was on the 22nd minute. But what a sideline, what a catch, and a lovely finish to, you know, that was an exhibitionist piece of skill from both players, actually.
But to see, like, he's obviously thinking, I'm going to try and put this ball over the bar. And the great players, and more than Richie Hogan with his goal, the great players spot something and then their focus kind of changes. And it was literally pinged. And Cooney was at full stretch catching the ball as well. It was glorious. Absolutely... The only pity was that maybe he didn't take it on 15 or 20 yards and even possibly go low or slip inside or something like that, because it would have been an unbelievable goal. But I really enjoyed that game as well. And it was I thought it was kind of cool to see, like, you know, 10 years ago, would a Leinster title have meant anything to Kilkenny? Without being disingenuous, no, it wouldn't have had.
They won the All-Ireland in 2015 and the fans headed off straight away.
Yeah, so like that'll just show you, what it means now to get a bit of silverware. And like as I said, they've had big wins in the last 3 years, and geez, like they won a big game without TJ Reid performing at all. Basically, like he only performed in the last 10 to 15 minutes, and like Cody's ruthlessness, Walter Walsh not doing it, off. Colin Fennelly not doing it, off. Conor Fogarty starting to tire, off. He just doesn't care. He just doesn't care. It doesn't matter what your reputation is. It doesn't matter what you've done for a club or anything like that. If you're not doing it on a given day, probably outside of TJ, you're going to be called ashore. And like people might have been even wondering about some of those subs. But, you know, Richie Hogan was obviously one of the ones that came in and turned the game as a result of that. If I was him, this is just me, I would probably give Colin Fennelly like 5 days off or something like that, because I think he looks jaded and he needs to be re-energised. I'd probably do maybe the same with Wally. But if they I know I'm looking at it from the perfect situation, but if they produce now in an All-Ireland semi-final, if TJ produces a bit more, maybe Richie starts, Wally stands up, Colin Fennelly delivers, all of a sudden you're thinking they're in an All-Ireland final. So huge optimism now on the Kilkenny front, without a doubt.
I think they'll definitely fancy an All-Ireland from here, and why wouldn't they? Because they're probably going to, like, it looks like if it goes to form, Waterford will end up playing Kilkenny in the semi-final. I think Kilkenny traditionally would always fancy winning that game, and maybe even sort of settling the score from the 2017 game in Semple Stadium when Waterford won after extra time. And then you've got Tipperary, Galway and Limerick knocking each other out on the other side of it, and then get yourself ready for a massive performance in the final. I think they'll fancy it. So that's it for the provincial finals review. Myself and Michael Verney. Go to orgaretro.com and get 15% off with the promo code OurGame if you want these jerseys, and I'll try and get this off me as quickly as possible. Right, keep tuned, because we're also going to have a show coming out about the qualifiers that happened at the weekend.